I never thought I'd be handcuffed in my own son's living room at 72 years old. All because I wanted to retrieve the pearl necklace my late husband gave me on our 40th anniversary. A necklace my daughter-in-law had borrowed months ago and conveniently forgotten to return. Now I was being treated like a common criminal, with my son standing there, arms crossed, watching the officers question me as if I were a stranger who had broken in. But security cameras see what human eyes choose to ignore, and sometimes the truth finds its way to the surface, no matter how deep it's buried. "Ma'am, please remain seated while we sort this out." The younger officer looked uncomfortable, glancing between my son Richard and me. His partner, an older woman with silver-streaked hair, was reviewing something on her tablet. The handcuffs bit into my wrists, and I felt a dull ache spreading up my arms. Through the bay window, I could see my neighbors peering out from behind their curtains. News travels fast in Montpellier, even in the more affluent neighborhoods where Richard and his wife Melissa had built their sprawling colonial 5 years ago. What a sight I must have been. Elaine Phillips, former high school English teacher of 35 years, respected widow of Judge William Phillips, sitting handcuffed in her pressed linen pants and cardigan while patrol cars with flashing lights parked in the driveway. "Richard, please tell them this is ridiculous," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You know I was just getting my necklace back, the one your father gave me." My son wouldn't meet my eyes. At 46, Richard had inherited his father's height and my stubbornness, but somewhere along the way, he'd lost the compassion that had made him such a sweet child. His jaw tightened as he addressed the officers. "Not me. I want to press charges." She entered our home without permission and was going through my wife's jewelry box. It's not the first time things have gone missing when my mother visits. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. I couldn't breathe for a moment. Not the first time? What was he implying? In all my 72 years, I had never stolen anything, not so much as a paperclip. "Richard Allen Phillips," I said, using his full name as I had when he was a child in trouble. "You know very well I called Melissa this morning and told her I was coming by to pick up my necklace. She said to let myself in with the key you gave me if no one was home." "That's not what Melissa says," Richard replied coldly. "She says you never called, and she certainly never told you to help yourself to her jewelry." The female officer, her nameplate read Torres, looked up from her tablet. "Sir, we can check the phone records if needed." "Do that," I said, relief washing over me. "You'll see I called their home phone at 9:17 this morning and spoke with Melissa for over 3 minutes. Richard's expression faltered for just a second before he recovered. "She would have told me if you'd called." "Would she?" I asked quietly. Our relationship had become increasingly strained since William died 8 years ago. My husband had been the bridge between us, smoothing over the rough edges that seemed to catch whenever Richard and I tried to connect. Without him, we drifted further apart, especially after Richard married Melissa 4 years ago. She was his second wife, 20 years his junior, and had made it clear from the beginning that she had little interest in playing daughter-in-law to a widow she considered old-fashioned and intrusive. "Let's all take a breath," Officer Torres suggested, clearly sensing the tension. "Mr. Phillips, you said you have security cameras?" Richard nodded. "Throughout the house. I installed them last year." "Can we see the footage from today?" she asked. A flicker of something, hesitation, crossed Richard's face. "I'm not sure that's necessary. I caught her red-handed in our bedroom." "It would help clarify the situation," the younger officer said. I sat up straighter, ignoring the bite of the handcuffs. "Yes, Richard. Show them the footage. It will show exactly what happened." After a moment of silence, Richard sighed dramatically and led the officers to his home office. I remained in the living room, alone with my thoughts and the throbbing pain in my wrists. How had we arrived at this point? When did my son start seeing me as an adversary rather than his mother? I thought of the day William and I had dropped Richard off at college, how he'd hugged me fiercely before walking away toward his new life. I remembered sitting in the audience at his law school graduation, bursting with pride. I recalled the day his daughter, my granddaughter Emma, was born, and how he'd placed her in my arms with tears in his eyes, saying, "Mom, meet your granddaughter." Where had that Richard gone? The sound of raised voices from the office pulled me from my memories. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. Richard was upset. A few minutes later, they returned to the living room, Richard looking flushed, and Officer Torres wearing a carefully neutral expression. "Mrs. Phillips," she said, approaching me, "I'm going to remove those handcuffs now." Relief flooded through me as she unlocked the restraints. I rubbed my wrists, wincing at the tender red marks they'd left behind. "The security footage clearly shows you entering the front door using a key," Officer Torres explained. "It also recorded a phone conversation between you and Mrs. Phillips this morning, where she expressly gave you permission to collect your necklace from her jewelry box if no one was home." Richard stood by the fireplace, arms crossed tight against his chest, staring at the floor. "The cameras in the bedroom show you opening the jewelry box and removing only a single pearl necklace," she continued. "At no point did you search through or take anything else." "Of course I didn't," I said softly. "It's my necklace. William gave it to me on our 40th anniversary, 2 years before he died." Officer Torres nodded. "Mr. Phillips, based on the evidence, there's no crime here. Your mother had permission to enter your home and was retrieving her own property." "There must be some mistake," Richard muttered, but his protest sounded hollow, even to my ears. "Where's Melissa?" I asked suddenly, realizing she was conspicuously absent from this entire situation. Richard's jaw tightened. "She's at her yoga class." "Did you call her before calling the police on your mother?" Officer Torres asked, her professional tone tinged with disbelief. Richard didn't answer, which was answer enough. The officers finished taking notes and prepared to leave. The younger one handed me his card. "Ma'am, if you need anything, please don't hesitate to call." I thanked them, clutching the small rectangle of cardstock like a lifeline. When the front door closed behind them, the house fell into a heavy silence. Richard and I stood facing each other across the living room, separated by more than just the expensive furniture. "You actually called the police on me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Your own mother. I thought you were—" He stopped, unable to say the word, stealing to my face. "After everything, after all these years," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "You really believe I would steal from you? Melissa said things have gone missing. She was sure it was happening when you visit, and you believed her without question. It wasn't a question, but a sad realization. She's my wife, Mom, and I'm your mother." I picked up my purse from where it had been tossed during the commotion. "I was there when you took your first steps. I sat up with you all night when you had chickenpox. I co-signed your first apartment lease. I helped you study for the bar exam." I reached into my purse and pulled out the pearl necklace, its soft luster catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows. "Your father saved for months to buy this for me. He wanted me to have something timeless, something I could wear into old age and eventually pass down to Emma." Richard's eyes followed the strand of pearls as I carefully placed them back in my purse. "I don't know what Melissa has told you about me or why she's convinced you I would steal from my own family, but one thing is clear to me now." I shouldered my purse and walked toward the door, each step deliberate and final. "You chose to believe the worst about me without a moment's hesitation. You humiliated me in front of the neighbors. You treated me like a criminal." I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. "Your father would be heartbroken." Richard flinched, as if I'd slapped him. "Mom, wait." "No," I said firmly. "I've waited 8 years for you to let me back into your life after your father died. I've tolerated Melissa's thinly veiled contempt. I've made excuses for why you're always too busy to bring Emma to visit me. I'm done waiting." I opened the door, feeling the spring air against my face. "When you're ready to apologize, truly apologize, you know where to find me. Until then, I think it's best we don't see each other." As I walked to my car, head held high despite the trembling in my hands, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, raw and throbbing, but alongside it was something else, a quiet resolve. For too long, I'd allowed myself to be pushed to the margins of my son's life, grateful for whatever scraps of attention he deigned to throw my way. No more. I started the engine of my 10-year-old Volvo, the car William and I had purchased together during his final year. As I pulled away from Richard's house, I caught sight of my reflection in the rearview mirror. There were tears in my eyes, but there was also a spark of something I hadn't seen in a long time. Determination. The 3-mile drive from Richard's house to mine felt like crossing an ocean. Each traffic light was a wave to navigate, each turn a current pulling me further from the shore of who I thought we were as a family. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands had stopped shaking, but my heart still thundered in my chest. My little Cape Cod stood exactly as I'd left it that morning. Blue shutters needing a fresh coat of paint, William's hydrangeas blooming along the walkway. How strange that the world could continue as if nothing had happened when everything had changed. Inside, I hung my keys on the hook by the door, a habit from 45 years of marriage, and set my purse on the entry table. The house welcomed me with familiar silence. Since William died, I'd grown accustomed to talking to myself, to him, to the walls, anything to fill the quiet. But today, I let the silence envelop me like a heavy blanket. I made tea, mechanically following the ritual William and I had shared every afternoon. 1 teaspoon of loose Earl Grey, water just off the boil, steep for exactly 4 minutes. As I waited, I pulled out my phone and saw 3 missed calls from my daughter, Charlotte. Charlotte lived in Portland, Oregon, with her wife, Elena, and their son, Noah. Unlike Richard, Charlotte called regularly, visited when she could, and never made me feel like an imposition. She was probably calling about her planned visit next month. I couldn't bear to tell her what had happened. Not yet. I needed time to process it myself. The tea timer chimed. I poured the amber liquid into William's favorite mug, the one with "World's Most Patient Judge" printed on it, a gag gift from his clerk on his retirement. I carried it to William's study, which I'd preserved almost exactly as he'd left it. His leather chair creaked as I settled into it, a sound so familiar it almost felt like a greeting. On the desk, arranged in neat rows, were framed family photos. William and me on our wedding day in 1974, Richard's high school graduation, Charlotte's law school commencement, more recent additions, Charlotte and Elena's wedding, Noah's first birthday. And there, in the center, a photo of all of us together at Richard's first wedding to Karen, before the divorce, before Melissa, before everything fell apart. I picked up that photo, studying Richard's face. He was smiling, his arm around Karen, standing next to his father. We were happy then, weren't we? Or was I remembering it through the rose-colored lens of grief? Karen had been good for Richard. Kind, practical, patient. When they divorced after 12 years of marriage, it had been a shock to all of us. "We want different things," Richard had explained vaguely. What he hadn't said, what Karen told me later over tear-stained coffee, was that he'd met Melissa, 20 years younger, and dazzled by Richard's success as a corporate attorney. The custody arrangement gave Karen primary custody of Emma, with Richard having her every other weekend and Wednesday dinners. Before Melissa, Richard had often asked me to watch Emma during his custody time when work emergencies arose. After Melissa, those calls stopped coming. I set the photo down and pulled out my phone again. The time had come to stop avoiding reality. I dialed Charlotte's number. "Mom, I've been calling you all day," Charlotte answered, her voice warm with concern. "Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath, then told her everything. The necklace, the accusation, the police, the security footage. As I spoke, the events of the day took on a surreal quality, as if I were describing a particularly unpleasant movie I'd watched rather than something that had actually happened to me. "He did what?" Charlotte's outrage vibrated through the phone. "He called the police on you? His own mother? I'm going to call him right now and—" "No, Charlotte," I interrupted firmly. "This is between Richard and me." "But Mom, he humiliated you. He accused you of stealing. That's not okay." "I know it's not," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "And I told him so. I told him not to contact me until he's ready to truly apologize." A beat of silence. "Wow, Mom. Good for you. I mean, I'm still furious with him, but I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." Pride. Such a simple word, but it warmed me from the inside out. When had anyone last been proud of me? Since William died, I'd been cast in the role of the fragile widow, someone to be managed and accommodated rather than respected. "I don't know what happens next," I admitted, "but I know I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it isn't." "Whatever you need, Mom. Elena and I can come early if you want company." I considered it for a moment, the comfort of having my daughter nearby, but something inside me resisted. "No, keep to your original plans. I think I think I need this time alone to figure some things out. After we hung up, I sipped my now lukewarm tea and let my gaze wander around William's study. Every surface held memories, law books we'd pored over together when he was in school and I was teaching to support us, the antique globe our children had given him for his 60th birthday, the watercolor of Montpellier's downtown that a grateful client had painted for him. My eyes landed on the small wooden box on his bookshelf. I rose and retrieved it, running my fingers over the polished walnut surface before opening it. Inside, nestled on velvet, lay William's pocket watch. It had belonged to his father, and his father before him. William had always assumed Richard would want it someday, but I'd kept it after his death, unable to part with this piece of him. Next to the watch was a folded piece of paper I hadn't noticed before. I carefully unfolded it to find William's handwriting, the familiar slant of his letters bringing tears to my eyes. "My dearest Elaine," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably going through my things, deciding what to keep and what to pass on. This watch should go to Richard eventually, but only when the time is right. You'll know when. Until then, keep it close, like you've kept me close all these years. Remember that the time we measure with watches is nothing compared to the time we measure with love. And Elaine, my love, don't let grief keep you from living. You have so much life left to live, so much love left to give. Be brave, my darling. Be yourself. All my love, always, William." I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling as if William had reached across the divide to speak directly to me. Be brave. Be yourself. For 8 years, I'd been living in the shadow of grief, defining myself primarily as William's widow rather than as Elaine Phillips in her own right. I'd allowed Richard and Melissa to push me to the periphery of their lives. I'd accepted the diminishing of my role as grandmother to Emma. I'd retreated into the comfort of routine and memory, letting the days blend together in a haze of quiet resignation. But today, standing in handcuffs in my son's living room, something had awakened in me. Some long-dormant sense of injustice, of self-worth, of righteous anger. I carefully refolded William's letter and placed it and the watch back in the box. Then I went to my desk in the corner of the living room and pulled out a legal pad. At the top, I wrote, "The truth about the pearls." It was time to set the record straight, not just about today's events, but about all of it. The slow erosion of my relationship with Richard, Melissa's subtle campaign to edge me out, the painful distance growing between me and my granddaughter Emma. I would document it all, every slight, every canceled visit, every hurtful comment disguised as concern. Not for revenge, for clarity, for truth, for myself. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows as I began to write, my teacher's penmanship precise and measured, my words anything but. For the first time in 8 years, I felt fully awake. 3 days passed without a word from Richard. No call, no text, not even an email. I wasn't surprised, but the silence still cut deep. In the evenings, I would sit on my porch with a glass of wine, watching the spring twilight settle over Montpellier, wondering if he was thinking of me at all. On the 4th morning, I was in my garden, coaxing William's perennials back to life, when my phone rang. My heart leapt, thinking it might be Richard, but the screen showed Karen's name instead. "Elaine? It's Karen." Her voice was tentative, as if she wasn't sure of her welcome. Though she was no longer my daughter-in-law, we'd maintained a cordial relationship over the years, mainly because of Emma. "Karen, how lovely to hear from you." I balanced the phone against my shoulder, brushing soil from my gardening gloves. "Is everything all right? I heard what happened at Richard's house." She paused. "Emma told me. She overheard Richard and Melissa arguing about it." My stomach tightened. "Emma knows? Oh God. What did Richard tell her?" "That's why I'm calling. Emma's confused and upset. Richard's version is, well, it's not flattering to you. Melissa's been telling Emma you're getting forgetful, that you might have memory issues." I could hear the quotation marks in her voice. "They're suggesting you were confused about the necklace." I closed my eyes, absorbing this new betrayal. Not content with accusing me of theft, they were now planting seeds of doubt about my mental competence, in my own granddaughter's mind, no less. "I'm 72, not 102, I said. unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. My mind is perfectly clear. I know that, Elaine. I've always known that. Karen's voice softened, which is why I'm calling. Emma has questions and I think she deserves honest answers. Would you be willing to talk to her? She's here with me now. It's my weekend. Of course, I said immediately. Put her on. There was a rustling sound, then my granddaughter's voice, hesitant and small. Grandma? Emma, sweetheart. I tried to keep my voice steady, not wanting my anger at Richard and Melissa to bleed into this conversation. How are you? I'm okay. A pause. Dad said you came to the house when no one was home. I took a deep breath, considering my words carefully. Emma was 14, old enough for truth, but not for the full weight of adult grievances. Yes, I did. I called ahead and spoke to Melissa. I needed to pick up something of mine that she had borrowed. My pearl necklace, the one Grandpa gave me for our anniversary. Do you remember it? The one with the silver clasp? You wore it to Dad and Melissa's wedding. That's the one. Melissa borrowed it months ago and hadn't returned it. I called to ask if I could come get it, and she said yes. She told me to use my key if no one was home. I paused. When I was there, your dad came home and misunderstood what was happening. He called the police on you. Emma's voice was flat with disbelief. He told them you were stealing. I closed my eyes against a fresh wave of pain. Yes, he did. But the cameras showed you weren't. Mom said there were security cameras. That's right. The cameras showed I was telling the truth. A longer silence. Melissa told me you get confused sometimes, that you forget things. My free hand clenched into a fist. Emma, I want you to listen carefully. I am not confused. I do not forget things. I teach a literature class at the community center twice a week. I do the New York Times crossword puzzle every morning. Last month, I helped organize the library's annual fundraiser. My mind is sharp, sweetheart. I believe you, Grandma. Her voice grew stronger. You've never lied to me. Those simple words loosened something in my chest. Thank you, Emma. Dad says we can't visit you for a while. He says you need space. I bit back my first response, that it was Richard who needed space, not me. That makes me sad because I miss you very much. But you can always call me anytime. And if you ever need me, I'm here. Always. I miss you too. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Melissa doesn't like when I talk about you. She gets this look on her face. Before I could respond, I heard Karen's voice in the background. Then Emma said, I have to go. Mom's taking me to my riding lesson. Can I call you again soon? Anytime, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too, Grandma. After we hung up, I sat on the garden bench, my gloves still covered in soil, my gardening forgotten. So Richard and Melissa were painting me as confused, possibly senile. A convenient narrative that would explain away my theft, while simultaneously undermining any defense I might offer. How neatly they had boxed me in. The realization settled cold in my stomach. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate strategy to isolate me, to diminish me in the eyes of my family. But why? What could Melissa possibly gain from driving a wedge between Richard and me? Between Emma and me? I went inside and washed my hands, my movements mechanical as my mind raced. At my desk, I opened the legal pad where I'd been documenting the pearl necklace incident. Now I had a new entry to add. April 17th, 2025. Learned that R&M are telling Emma I have memory issues, or attempting to discredit me. Seeing it written in black and white made it real in a way that twisted my heart. I'd spent my entire adult life building a family, creating a safe haven of love and trust. Now I was documenting its destruction like a case study in betrayal. My phone rang again, Karen calling back. Emma's at her lesson, she said, without preamble. I wanted to speak freely. Elaine, something isn't right in that house. I sat up straighter. What do you mean? Emma's been telling me things, small things, but they add up. Melissa going through her phone. Richard canceling plans with Emma at the last minute because Melissa suddenly needs him for something. Melissa making comments about Emma's weight. My blood ran cold. Emma had always been slender, like her mother. What kind of comments? Suggesting she skip dessert. Buying her clothes a size too small as motivation. Last month, Emma overheard Melissa tell Richard that Emma is chunky, and it reflects poorly on them. I gripped the phone tighter. She's 14 years old, for God's sake. She's perfect exactly as she is. I know that. You know that. But Emma is starting to doubt it. Karen's voice cracked slightly. I've tried talking to Richard, but he defends Melissa at every turn. Says I'm exaggerating or that Melissa is just trying to help Emma develop healthy habits. This is unacceptable, I said, my teacher's voice emerging, the one I'd used when a student was being bullied. Emma needs to be protected. I've documented everything, Karen said. If it escalates, I'm prepared to seek a modification to the custody arrangement. But Richard has money and connections. It won't be easy. After we hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time, staring at the legal pad in front of me. This was no longer just about me, about a pearl necklace or a false accusation. This was about Emma, about protecting her from harm. I thought of William, of what he would do in this situation. As a family court judge for over 20 years, he'd seen his share of toxic dynamics, of children caught in the crossfire of adult conflicts. The child's well-being always comes first, he'd often said. Always. I opened my laptop and typed emotional abuse of stepchildren into the search bar. As I read through articles and resources, a hollow feeling spread through my chest. So many of the warning signs matched what Karen had described. Isolation from extended family, criticism of physical appearance, monitoring of communications, unpredictable cancellation of plans with the other parent. I reached for my phone to call Charlotte, then hesitated. What could she do from Portland? And did I want to pull her into this mess? No. I needed someone local, someone who understood the law and the community. The answer came to me suddenly. Judge Marianne Coleman, William's colleague and friend. She'd retired 2 years ago, but was still active in child advocacy work. We weren't close friends, but we'd served on charity committees together, and she'd always spoken fondly of William. I found her number in my contacts and dialed before I could lose my nerve. Marianne? It's Elaine Phillips, William's widow. I paused. I need your advice about a family situation. It concerns my granddaughter, and I think she may be at risk. Judge Marianne Coleman's home was exactly what I expected. A stately Victorian with a wraparound porch, situated on one of Montpellier's tree-lined streets. She greeted me at the door herself, her silver hair swept back in a neat bun, her handshake firm and reassuring. Elaine, come in. It's been too long. She led me into a sunlit sitting room where tea was already set out on a small table. I was so sorry to hear about this situation with your son. We settled into comfortable chairs, and I found myself telling her everything, not just about the pearl necklace incident and the false accusations, but about the years of subtle exclusion, the slow poisoning of my relationship with Richard, and now, most alarmingly, the concerns about Emma's treatment in their home. Marianne listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a small pad. When I finished, she set down her teacup with deliberate care. First, let me say how sorry I am that you're going through this. It's particularly painful when family members who should be your strongest supporters become adversaries. She chose the word carefully. Now, regarding Emma, what you're describing is concerning, but it's in a gray area legally. Comments about weight, canceling plans, these things are harmful, yes, but they don't typically rise to the level that would trigger intervention by family services. My heart sank. So there's nothing we can do? I didn't say that. Marianne's eyes, sharp behind her reading glasses, held mine. Documentation is key. Karen is right to be keeping records. You should continue to do the same. Every incident, every comment, every canceled visit, write it all down with dates and times. I've started doing that, I said, gesturing to my purse where my legal pad was tucked away. Good. Now, about your direct relationship with Emma. Richard can limit your physical access to her during his custody time, but he cannot legally prevent you from communicating with her entirely unless there's a court order, which there isn't. He's told her they can't visit me for a while. That's unfortunate, but within his rights as a parent. However, phone calls, texts, emails, these are different. Have you been in touch with Emma since the incident? Yes. She called me from Karen's house. She wants to keep in contact. Marianne nodded approvingly. Maintain that connection. Be a stable, supportive presence in her life. Document any attempts by Richard or Melissa to interfere with that communication. And then what? I asked, frustration edging into my voice. We just keep taking notes while Emma suffers? Marianne's expression softened. I understand your impatience, Elaine, but building a case takes time, especially in situations like this where the harm isn't overt physical abuse. What we need is a pattern, evidence of ongoing behavior that negatively impacts Emma's well-being. She reached for a folder on the side table and handed it to me. I've put together some resources for you and Karen. Information about emotional abuse, contact details for family advocates, templates for documentation. These might help. I accepted the folder, grateful for the concrete assistance, but still feeling helpless. I just want to protect her, Marianne. She's such a special girl. Sensitive, artistic. She reminds me so much of Charlotte at that age. Tell me about Emma, Marianne suggested, refilling our teacups. What are her interests? I felt myself smile for the first time that day. She loves horses. She's been taking riding lessons since she was 7. She writes poetry, beautiful, thoughtful poems that she sends me sometimes. She plays violin in the school orchestra, and she volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends when she's with Karen. She sounds like a remarkable young woman. You must be very proud. I am. The simple acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. William would have been too. He always had a special connection with her. After he died, well, that's when things really started to change with Richard. Marianne nodded thoughtfully. Grief affects families in complex ways. Some bonds strengthen, others fracture. Richard changed after William died, became harder, more distant. Then he met Melissa, and it was like he became a different person entirely. People often remake themselves in new relationships, Marianne observed. Not always for the better. We talked for another hour, moving from the immediate concerns about Emma to broader reflections on family dynamics, loss, and resilience. By the time I left, clutching the folder of resources, I felt both lighter and more determined. One more thing, Elaine, Marianne said as she walked me to the door. I know several excellent family therapists who specialize in blended family situations. If Richard ever becomes open to that option, let me know. Sometimes a neutral third party can help navigate these waters. Thank you, but I'm not holding my breath, I admitted. Richard sees any suggestion from me as criticism these days. Then perhaps the suggestion could come from someone else. Someone he respects professionally. I considered this. His law partner, maybe. James Holloway. They've been friends since law school, and Richard values his opinion. That could work. Plant the seed. Let it grow on its own. Marianne clasped my hand. Stay strong, Elaine, and stay in touch. I want to know how this unfolds. On the drive home, my mind kept returning to something Marianne had said. People often remake themselves in new relationships. Had Richard remade himself for Melissa? Or had she simply uncovered aspects of his character that had always been there, dormant beneath the surface? I thought back to Richard's childhood, searching for early signs of the man he'd become. He'd always been competitive, driven, sometimes inflexible, but he'd also been loving, loyal, and principled. William had nurtured those better qualities in him, serving as both role model and gentle corrective when Richard's ambition threatened to overshadow his compassion. Without William's influence, had Richard simply drifted toward his harder edges? Or was Melissa actively encouraging that drift, reshaping him into someone who would call the police on his own mother? At home, I added notes from my meeting with Marianne to my legal pad, then called Karen to share what I'd learned. She sounded tired, but grateful for the resources. Emma's been asking about you, she said, wondering when she'll get to see you again. Richard's made it clear that won't be happening during his custody time, I replied, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. But she can always call me from your house, and perhaps you could bring her over for dinner sometime? Of course. She'd love that. Karen paused. There's something else. Emma mentioned that Melissa has been wearing your pearl necklace. Apparently she told Emma that you gave it to her as a gift. I gripped the phone tighter. That's a lie. I would never give away William's anniversary gift to me. I thought as much. Emma seemed confused because she remembered how special it was to you. After we hung up, I sat at my desk, staring at the notes I'd been compiling. A new pattern was emerging, clearer now with this latest revelation. Melissa wasn't just trying to edge me out of their lives. She was attempting to replace me entirely, wearing my jewelry, claiming my gifts as her own, positioning herself as Emma's primary grandmother figure. But why? What had I ever done to her except try to be welcoming? I'd brought homemade meals when Emma was sick. I'd remembered Melissa's birthday with thoughtful gifts. I'd offered to help with household projects when they bought the new house. I'd bent over backward to accommodate their busy schedules. My phone chimed with a text message alert. It was from Emma. "Hi, Grandma. Just wanted to say goodnight. Love you." Such a simple message, but it filled my heart. I texted back, "Good night, sweetheart. I love you too. Sweet dreams." A moment later, another text arrived. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Anything." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Did you give Melissa your pearl necklace? She told Dad you did, but I remember you saying Grandpa gave it to you and you'd never give it away." I took a deep breath, considering my response carefully. I didn't want to put Emma in the middle of adult conflicts, but I also wouldn't lie to her. "No, sweetheart. I did not give the necklace to Melissa. It was a special gift from your grandfather, and I plan to give it to you someday when you're older." The 3 dots appeared again. Then, "I thought so. Thanks for telling me the truth, Grandma. I'll call you tomorrow from Mom's. Love you." I set down my phone, a new resolve hardening within me. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about truth, about integrity, about the values William and I had tried to instill in our children. It was about Emma and what she was learning from watching the adults in her life. I opened my laptop and navigated to James Holloway's email address. It was time to plant that seed Marianne had suggested. Time to try a different approach. For Emma's sake, I had to try everything. The email to James Holloway was carefully crafted, concerned but not accusatory, personal but not emotional. I told him I was worried about Richard, about the growing distance between us, about the pearl necklace incident. I suggested that work stress might be affecting his judgment, and gently proposed that family therapy could help all of us navigate this difficult time. I didn't mention Melissa directly. James was smart enough to read between the lines. His response came the next morning, brief but thoughtful. "Elaine, thank you for reaching out. I've noticed Richard seems tense lately. I'll find an appropriate moment to suggest he consider your proposal. In the meantime, please know that I've always respected you and William, and I'm sorry to hear about this difficult situation." It wasn't much, but it was something. A small thread of hope in a tapestry that had become increasingly dark. 2 weeks passed. Spring fully arrived in Vermont, coating the world in tender green. I kept busy with my community center literature class, my garden, and regular calls with Emma, who phoned faithfully from Karen's house. We never spoke about Richard or Melissa during these calls. Instead, we discussed books she was reading, her writing lessons, a science project on water quality that had won honorable mention in the school fair. These conversations were lifelines for both of us, I think, moments of normalcy in a situation that felt anything but normal. Charlotte called daily, offering support from afar. She'd postponed her visit, respecting my request for time alone, but I could hear the worry in her voice. "Are you sure you're all right, Mom? Elena and I could be there in a day if you need us." "I'm managing," I assured her. "Judge Coleman has been very helpful, and Karen is keeping me updated about Emma." "And Richard? Any word?" Nothing. The silence from my son had become its own presence in my life, a hovering specter of unresolved conflict. James Holloway may have spoken to him by now, but if so, there's been no indication. Charlotte sighed. "I still can't believe he called the police on you. What was he thinking?" It was a question I'd asked myself countless times over the past weeks. What indeed had been going through Richard's mind? Had he genuinely believed I was stealing, or had it been a calculated move to discredit me? Either possibility was painful to contemplate. On a Wednesday afternoon in early May, I was returning from the grocery store when I noticed an unfamiliar car in my driveway, a sleek black Audi with tinted windows. As I pulled up behind it, the driver's door opened and Melissa stepped out. My heart rate doubled instantly. In the 3 years since Richard had married her, Melissa had never once visited my home alone. She'd always been at Richard's side, her presence an extension of his. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly pension, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders. As I got out of my car, I noticed she was wearing pearl earrings that matched the necklace she'd borrowed from me. "Elaine," she said, her voice honey-sweet, "I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced. I kept my expression neutral as I gathered my grocery bags. "Hello, Melissa. This is certainly a surprise. I thought it was time we had a chat, just the two of us." She smiled, showing perfect teeth. "May I come in?" Everything in me wanted to refuse, to tell her to leave my property immediately. But curiosity won out. Why was she here? What did she want? "Of course," I said, unlocking my front door. "Would you like some tea?" "That would be lovely." I busied myself in the kitchen, putting away perishables and setting the kettle to boil, while Melissa wandered around my living room, examining the photos on the mantel, the books on the shelves, the watercolors I'd painted in my retirement art class. "You have a charming home," she said, her tone suggesting the opposite. "So many memories." I set the tea tray on the coffee table with more force than necessary. "William and I built a life here. Yes, there are memories." Melissa settled onto my sofa, crossing her legs at the ankle. "That's actually why I'm here, Elaine. To talk about the past and how it's affecting the present." I poured the tea, noting with petty satisfaction that my hand was steadier than hers as she accepted the cup. "I'm listening. Richard is very upset about what happened." She stirred a spoonful of honey into her tea. "He feels betrayed by your actions." "My actions?" I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. "He called the police on me for retrieving my own property you had borrowed without returning." Melissa waved a manicured hand dismissively. "There was clearly a misunderstanding about the necklace. I thought it was a gift. A gift I never offered, and you never thanked me for." "Curious." Her smile tightened. "The point is, Richard is hurt. He feels you've been undermining our marriage from the beginning." I set my teacup down carefully, afraid I might throw it otherwise. "That's absurd. I've bent over backwards to be supportive of your relationship." "Have you?" Melissa leaned forward. "The constant comparisons to Karen, the reminiscing about how things used to be? The way you always managed to bring up William and how he would have handled things differently?" I felt heat rising in my cheeks. "I've never compared you to Karen. And if I mention William, it's because he was Richard's father for 43 years. He shaped who Richard is." "Who Richard was," Melissa corrected. "People change, Elaine. Richard has evolved. He's moved beyond the small-town judge's son you remember. He's a partner in the largest corporate law firm in Vermont now. We move in different circles, associate with different people. And that requires cutting off his mother, accusing me of theft, telling Emma I'm losing my mind." Something flashed in Melissa's eyes, surprise perhaps that I knew about the comments regarding my mental state. She recovered quickly. "No one's saying you're losing your mind. Just that, well, memory issues are common at your age. Richard is concerned, that's all." "My memory is perfect," I said coldly, "as the security footage at your house clearly showed." Melissa sipped her tea, then set it down with a sigh. "Look, I didn't come here to argue. I came to offer a solution, a way forward for all of us." "I'm listening." "Richard and I have been discussing your situation. Living alone at your age can be challenging. We've been researching some lovely retirement communities." "Stop right there." I stood up, anger coursing through me like electricity. "I am not moving to a retirement home. I am perfectly capable of living independently, and I intend to do so for many years to come." Melissa remained seated, looking up at me with what appeared to be practiced concern. "Elaine, please. We're only thinking of your welfare. What if you fell? What if there was an emergency? I have a medical alert system, a security system, and neighbors who check on me regularly. I teach twice a week. I volunteer. I am not isolated or incapable. Even so, wouldn't it be nice to be around people your own age? To have activities and meals provided? Not to worry about home maintenance?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and suddenly everything clicked into place. "This isn't about my welfare at all, is it? This is about my house." Melissa's expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened slightly. "I don't know what you mean. This house, the land it sits on, that's what this is really about." I gestured around us. "My home is on 3 acres at the edge of town. Land that's become increasingly valuable as Montpelier expands. Land that Richard would inherit if something happened to me." "That's ridiculous," Melissa protested, but not convincingly. "We're concerned about you, that's all." "No, you're concerned about what you can get from me." The realization was like ice water in my veins. "That's why you've been trying to paint me as confused, possibly senile. That's why Richard called the police instead of simply asking me what I was doing in your house. You're building a case that I'm incompetent. Melissa stood now, abandoning the pretense of concern. You're being paranoid. Am I? Let me guess. You and Richard have plans for this property. Maybe a larger home for yourselves? Or perhaps to subdivide and develop? The zoning was changed last year to allow for multifamily dwellings in this area. As a corporate attorney specializing in real estate, Richard would know all about that. A flush crept up Melissa's neck. You have no idea what you're talking about. I think I do. I moved toward the front door. I think it's time for you to leave, Melissa. And you can tell Richard that I'm having my will revised. This house, this land, it's going into a trust for Emma's education. Not a penny or a square foot of it will ever be yours. Melissa grabbed her purse, her composure slipping for the first time. You'll regret this, Elaine. Richard was prepared to be generous, to help you transition gracefully into the next phase of your life. But if you insist on being difficult, on poisoning Emma against us with your lies and manipulations— I've never lied to Emma, I interrupted, and I never will. Now please leave my home. After Melissa's car disappeared down the driveway, I sat heavily on the porch steps, my hands shaking with delayed reaction. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place now, forming a picture that turned my stomach. This wasn't just about a pearl necklace or family dynamics, or even Melissa's insecurity about her role in Richard's life. This was about assets, about inheritance, about calculating what could be gained if I were out of the picture, or at least out of this house. I pulled out my phone and dialed Charlotte. Mom? What's wrong? You sound upset. Melissa just left my house, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I think I finally understand what's been happening, and I need your help. Charlotte arrived 2 days later, a whirlwind of efficiency and righteous anger. She'd left Elena and Noah in Portland, promising to return within a week. The moment she walked through my door, dropping her carry-on in the entryway, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. My daughter, my fierce advocate, had come. Let me see everything, she said after our tearful embrace. All your notes, all your documentation. I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with. We spread my legal pad pages across the dining room table. Every incident, every slight, every concerning comment about Emma, all meticulously recorded. Charlotte, an environmental lawyer accustomed to building complex cases, read through everything with a critical eye, occasionally asking for clarification or additional details. This is more calculated than I thought, she said finally, tapping the page where I'd recorded Melissa's visit. The groundwork they're laying, suggesting memory issues, the police report about you entering their home, now this sudden concern about your living situation, they're building a case for guardianship. Guardianship? The word sent a chill through me. They want legal control over me? Charlotte nodded grimly. It fits the pattern. If they could. Convince a judge that you're not competent to manage your own affairs, Richard could be appointed your guardian. He'd have control over your finances, your medical decisions, your living arrangements, everything. But that's absurd. I'm perfectly capable. You and I know that. But a judge might only see an elderly widow living alone with a concerned son who's a respected attorney claiming his mother is showing signs of cognitive decline. Charlotte's expression hardened. It's a common tactic in elder abuse cases, financial abuse specifically. Elder abuse? The term seemed foreign, unrelated to my situation. Surely it's not that serious. Mom, Charlotte took my hands. Attempting to manipulate you out of your property is absolutely financial abuse. Using the threat of limited access to Emma as leverage is emotional abuse. Calling the police on you under false pretenses and then spreading rumors about your mental competence is a form of psychological abuse. Hearing it laid out so starkly made my chest tighten. I'd been thinking of this as a family conflict, a misunderstanding that had spiraled out of control. But abuse? The word carried weight, implications I wasn't sure I was ready to accept. What do we do? I asked finally. Charlotte was already making notes on a fresh legal pad. First, we get your affairs in order. Tomorrow we're meeting with my friend Thomas Chen. He's an estate attorney I worked with on an environmental trust case last year. He's agreed to help us set up a trust for your assets that will protect them from any guardianship attempt. Will that be enough? It's a start. We'll also get statements from your doctor confirming your cognitive health, letters from your community center students, and fellow volunteers attesting to your capabilities. And we'll set up a financial monitoring system with fraud alerts to track any unusual activity. Charlotte continued outlining her plan, her legal mind breaking the problem into manageable pieces, identifying vulnerabilities and creating safeguards. I listened, grateful for her expertise, but saddened that it was necessary. "What about Emma?" I asked when she paused. "She's caught in the middle of all this." Charlotte's expression softened. "That's trickier. Legally, we don't have standing to intervene in Richard's parenting decisions, but we can continue to document any concerning behavior toward her, and we can support Karen in protecting Emma during her custody time." That evening, after a dinner of comfort food I'd prepared while Charlotte made calls, we sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies emerge in the twilight. It was a perfect spring evening, the air scented with lilac and honeysuckle from William's garden. "I keep thinking about Dad," Charlotte said, her head resting on my shoulder like she used to do as a child. "He would be so angry about what Richard is doing. He wouldn't recognize the man Richard has become," I agreed softly. "Your father always taught you both that family was sacred, that we protect each other, not exploit each other. Do you think Richard remembers that at all, or has Melissa completely rewired him?" I considered the question carefully. "I think Richard is still in there somewhere, the boy who helped your father build birdhouses for the backyard. The young man who carried an elderly neighbor's groceries every week without being asked. The father who wept when Emma was born. You're more generous than I am," Charlotte said. "Right now, all I see is someone who's willing to destroy his mother for property." I squeezed her hand. "We don't know that he's fully aware of what Melissa is doing. She may be manipulating him too, feeding him a narrative about me that he's choosing to believe because it's easier than questioning her." Charlotte looked skeptical, but didn't argue. We sat in comfortable silence until my phone chimed with a text. It was from Karen. "Emma wants to say goodnight. Can she call?" Moments later, my phone rang. "Grandma, Mom said Aunt Charlotte is there with you." "She is, sweetheart. She's right here." "Hi, Emma Bean," Charlotte called, using her childhood nickname for her niece. "Hi, Aunt Charlotte." Emma's voice brightened. "Are you guys having a good visit?" "The best," I said. "We're sitting on the porch swing watching the fireflies come out." "I wish I was there too." Emma's voice dropped. "Dad and Melissa are fighting again. About money, I think. I'm in my room with headphones on, but I can still hear them sometimes." I exchanged a glance with Charlotte. "I'm sorry to hear that, sweetheart. It's not fun when adults argue. Melissa wants to go to Europe this summer, but Dad says they can't afford it right now because of some investment thing. She said he promised, and he said promises change when circumstances change." Emma's matter-of-fact recounting of their argument highlighted how accustomed she'd become to their conflicts. "Anyway, I just wanted to say goodnight. I miss you both." After saying our goodnights and ending the call, Charlotte looked thoughtful. "Financial strain. That's interesting. How so?" "It adds context to their sudden interest in your property. If Richard's investments aren't performing well and Melissa is pressuring him for an expensive lifestyle they can't quite afford, they start looking for other assets," I finished, "like a 3-acre property at the edge of a growing town." The next morning we met with Thomas Chen, a sharp-minded attorney in his 50s with kind eyes behind stylish glasses. He listened carefully to our concerns, reviewed my documentation, and then outlined several options for protecting my assets. "An irrevocable trust is your best defense," he explained. "Once your assets are in the trust, they're no longer legally yours, so they can't be touched even if someone were to gain guardianship over you. The trust would have specific terms for how the assets can be used, for your care during your lifetime, and then for Emma's education or whatever other purpose you designate after your passing." "Would Richard know about this trust?" I asked. "Not unless you tell him. The trust documents are private." "And this would protect the house? Keep it from being sold out from under me?" Thomas nodded. "The house, your investments, anything you place in the trust would be protected. You would be the beneficiary during your lifetime, meaning you continue to live in the house and receive income from investments. But the assets themselves would be owned by the trust, not by you personally." "Let's do it," I said decisively. For the next several hours, we worked through the details of the trust, designating Charlotte as trustee, specifying how assets would be managed during my lifetime and distributed after my death. When we finished, I felt a sense of relief. At least my home was safe. On the drive back, Charlotte was quiet, her lawyer brain still working. "We should get copies of the security footage from Richard's house," she said suddenly. "The footage that showed you had permission to be there and were only taking your own necklace." "Why? The police already saw it." "Evidence, Mom. If Richard and Melissa are building a case against you, we need to be building our own counter case. That footage directly contradicts their narrative about you being confused or taking things that aren't yours. How would we get it? Richard's not likely to hand it over." Charlotte smiled grimly. "Leave that to me. I have some ideas." That evening, as we prepared dinner together, Charlotte asked the question I'd been dreading. "Do you think there's any chance of reconciliation with Richard? Of bringing him back from whatever spell Melissa has cast over him?" I chopped vegetables methodically, buying time to consider my answer. "I don't know," I admitted finally. "Part of me hopes so. He's my son. I love him. But another part of me wonders if too much damage has been done. He called the police on me, Charlotte. He stood there and watched them put handcuffs on me. How do we come back from that?" "I don't know either," Charlotte said softly. "But I do know one thing. We're going to protect you and Emma, whatever it takes. That's what family really does." Later, as I lay in bed listening to Charlotte moving around in the guest room, I thought about William. What would he make of all this? My pragmatic, justice-minded husband would be heartbroken about Richard's actions, but he would also want me to be strategic, to think several moves ahead. "This isn't just about your property, Elaine," I could almost hear him say. "It's about your dignity, your autonomy. Don't let anyone take that from you, not even our son." I drifted off to sleep with a new resolve forming. Tomorrow we would continue building our defenses. But soon, very soon, it would be time to take the offensive. The pieces fell into place over the next 3 days with a swiftness that surprised even Charlotte. Through a series of strategic calls, to James Holloway, to the police officers who had responded to Richard's call, to Judge Coleman, we gathered the information and support we needed. Charlotte's legal connections proved invaluable, opening doors that might otherwise have remained closed. The turning point came when James Holloway called me directly, his voice grave and concerned. "Elaine, I've been looking into some things at the firm. I think you and Charlotte should come to my office tomorrow. There's something you need to see." The next morning, we sat across from James in his corner office, with its sweeping views of the Green Mountains. He slid a folder across his polished desk. "Richard doesn't know I'm sharing this with you," he began. "And professionally speaking, I probably shouldn't be. But ethically, I can't stay silent." Inside the folder were documents related to a real estate development project, the Ridgeline at Montpelier, a proposed luxury housing development on the eastern edge of town. My edge of town. "Richard's been working on this project for over a year," James explained. "Initially, it was just a standard development deal, the firm representing the investors. But about 6 months ago, Richard and Melissa became personal investors in the project." Charlotte flipped through the papers, her expression darkening. "Let me guess. Their investment is contingent on acquiring additional adjacent properties to expand the development footprint." James nodded. 3 specific properties, to be exact. He pointed to a map in the file. Your mother's being one of them. The other 2 properties had already been purchased, the map showed. Mine was the last holdout, the final piece needed to make the development viable, at the scale the investors envisioned. "How much have they invested?" I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. James hesitated. "More than they should have. Significantly more. If this development doesn't go forward, they stand to lose, well, nearly everything. So that's why Melissa was pushing for me to move to a retirement community," I said. "That's why they've been laying groundwork to question my competence." "I'm afraid so." James looked genuinely troubled. "When I suggested to Richard that pressuring you to sell might constitute a conflict of interest, he dismissed my concerns, said you'd be better off in a managed care facility anyway, given your condition." "My non-existent condition," I corrected sharply. "Exactly." James leaned forward. "Elaine, I've known you for 20 years. You're as sharp as ever. What Richard is doing, it's not just unethical, it's potentially criminal. Charlotte was already taking notes. Financial elder abuse, attempted fraud, possibly conspiracy, if we can prove Melissa was actively involved in the plan. James nodded. The firm can't be associated with this. I've already consulted our ethics committee. We're removing Richard from the Ridgeline project effective immediately, and he's been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. As we left James's office, I felt strangely calm. The final puzzle piece had clicked into place. This wasn't about family dynamics or personal resentments. It was about money, pure and simple. My son had been willing to destroy our relationship, to paint me as incompetent, all for a real estate deal. "What do you want to do, Mom?" Charlotte asked as we drove home. "We have options now. Legal options." I gazed out the window at the rolling Vermont landscape, at the town where I'd spent my entire adult life. "I want the truth to come out," I said finally. "All of it. No more shadows, no more whispers about my mental state, no more lies about the pearl necklace. I want everything in the open." The following day was Sunday, Mother's Day. The irony wasn't lost on me as Charlotte and I finalized our plan over breakfast. By mid-morning, everything was in place. I picked up my phone and did something I hadn't done in over a month. I called Richard. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice guarded. "Mom, this is unexpected." "Hello, Richard. Happy Mother's Day." I kept my tone neutral, betraying none of the emotions churning beneath the surface. A pause. "Yes, happy Mother's Day. How are you?" "I'm well. Charlotte's visiting. We were hoping you and Emma might join us for dinner tonight. Melissa too, of course." The invitation was delivered casually, as if the past month had never happened. His surprise was audible. "Dinner? Tonight?" "Yes. It's been too long since we've all been together as a family. And I have some news I'd like to share." Another, longer pause. I could almost hear the calculations happening in his mind, weighing the awkwardness of accepting against the possibility of learning what my news might be, especially if it related to my living situation or finances. "What time?" he asked finally. 6 o'clock. I'm making William's pot roast. We'll be there." After hanging up, I looked at Charlotte, who had been listening intently. "He's coming. With Emma and Melissa." She nodded. "Good. I'll call Karen and Judge Coleman. Everything's set with the security company?" "Yes. They'll arrive at 5 to set up." The rest of the day passed in a flurry of preparation, cooking William's famous pot roast, setting the table with my best china, arranging flowers from the garden. On the surface, it looked like any other family dinner. Only the small cameras being discreetly installed by the security technicians hinted at the evening's true purpose. At precisely 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I smoothed my dress, a flattering navy blue that Charlotte had insisted brought out my eyes, and opened the door to find Richard, Melissa, and Emma on my porch. Emma immediately rushed forward to hug me. "Happy Mother's Day, Grandma. I've missed you so much." I held her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I've missed you too, sweetheart." Richard hung back, his expression a careful mask of neutrality. Melissa stood beside him, elegant in a cream-colored dress, her face fixed in a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. And there, gleaming at her throat, was my pearl necklace. "Richard, Melissa, thank you for coming." I stepped back to allow them inside. Charlotte's in the living room. As we moved through the entryway, Richard stiffened at the sight of Karen and Judge Coleman rising from the sofa. "What is this?" he demanded, turning to me. "You didn't mention other guests." "Didn't I? I'm sorry. Must have slipped my mind." I smiled placidly. "You know how forgetful I've been lately. At least that's what you've been telling people." Richard's face paled. "Mom, what's going on? Why don't we all sit down? Dinner's almost ready, but first, I think we have some things to discuss." Emma looked confused. "Dad? What's happening?" "Nothing, honey," Melissa said quickly, placing a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Just some boring adult talk. Why don't you go help your grandmother in the kitchen?" "Actually," I interjected, "I'd like Emma to stay. This concerns her too." Richard took a step toward me, his voice lowered. "Mom, if this is some kind of ambush—" "Not an ambush, Richard. An intervention." I gestured to the living room. "Please sit down." Once everyone was seated, Richard and Melissa on the love seat, Emma between Karen and Charlotte on the sofa, Judge Coleman in William's armchair, I remained standing, suddenly feeling every bit of my 72 years, yet strangely empowered by them too. For the past month, I began, I've been trying to understand what happened to our family, why my son would call the police on me for retrieving my own property, why my daughter-in-law would claim my pearl necklace, the one she's wearing right now, was a gift when it wasn't, why there would be rumors about my mental competence, why my granddaughter was being told I have memory issues. Richard shifted uncomfortably. Melissa's hand went to the necklace. I've been documenting everything, I continued, trying to make sense of it all. But it wasn't until James Holloway shared some information with me that the full picture became clear. James had no right, Richard began hotly. He had every right, as a concerned friend and ethical attorney, I interrupted. The Ridgeline development, Richard. That's what this is all about, isn't it? Your investment, your financial future, the need for my property to complete the project. The color drained from Richard's face. Melissa's fingers tightened around her purse. Mom, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You and Melissa overextended yourselves financially. You need my land. And when I wouldn't sell, you began building a case to have me declared incompetent so you could take control of my assets. I held his gaze steadily. Your own mother, Richard. The woman who raised you, who taught you right from wrong. It's not like that, he protested weakly. It's exactly like that, Charlotte interjected. We have the documentation, the development plans, the investment records, the police report from when you called the cops on Mom, the security footage from your house showing she had permission to be there, the text messages between you and Melissa discussing how to get Mom's property. Emma was staring at her father, her young face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. Dad? Is that true? Were you trying to take Grandma's house? Richard couldn't meet her eyes. It's complicated, Emma. Adult situations sometimes require difficult decisions. There was nothing complicated about calling the police on your mother, Karen said quietly. That was a choice, Richard, a terrible one. Judge Coleman cleared her throat. Richard, Melissa, I want to be very clear about what's happening here. This meeting is being recorded. She gestured discreetly to the cameras. What you've been attempting constitutes elder abuse, financially and emotionally. It's a criminal offense in Vermont. We never abused anyone, Melissa burst out. We were concerned about Elaine's welfare, that's all. Is that why you told people I was confused? Having memory issues? I asked. Is that why you claimed my necklace, the one you're wearing right now, was a gift? Melissa's hand went to the pearls again. You said I could borrow it. Borrow, not keep, not claim as your own. I turned back to Richard. I've made some decisions, Richard. First, I've placed all my assets in an irrevocable trust. The house, my savings, everything. The trust benefits me during my lifetime, and after I'm gone, the assets will be divided between Charlotte and Emma. Not you. Richard flinched, as if I'd struck him. Second, I've filed a formal complaint with the Vermont Bar Association regarding your ethical violations in the Ridgeline project. James has already placed you on administrative leave, as I'm sure you know. You can't do this, he said, his voice hollow. You're my mother. Yes, I am. Which makes your betrayal all the more painful. I took a deep breath. But I'm still your mother, Richard, which is why I haven't gone to the police. Yet. What do you want? Melissa asked, her polished veneer cracking. I want the truth acknowledged. I want the rumors about my mental state retracted. I want my necklace returned. And I want unrestricted access to my granddaughter. I looked directly at Richard. I'm offering you a chance to make amends, to begin rebuilding what you've broken. It's more than you offered me. The room fell silent. Emma was the first to move, crossing to stand beside me. I believe you, Grandma. I always did. Her simple declaration, the unwavering loyalty in her young eyes, brought tears to mine. I put my arm around her shoulders, drawing strength from her presence. Richard looked from Emma to me, then to Charlotte, Karen, and Judge Coleman. The weight of accountability, of witnesses to his choices, seemed to press down on him physically. For the first time, I saw a flicker of the son I remembered, the one who understood right from wrong, who valued family above all else. I'm sorry, he said finally, his voice barely audible. I don't know how things went so far. I never wanted. Yet here we are, I said softly. The question is, where do we go from here? As we moved toward the dining room, the pot roast waiting on the table, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps its distant relative, the possibility of healing. I had stood my ground. I had protected myself. I had refused to be erased. At 72, I had found my voice again. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone silence it. If you've ever felt invisible or been silenced by those who should protect you, know that it's never too late to reclaim your power. Remember, your story isn't over until you decide it is, and the final chapter belongs to you.